Matt Devine, just your everyday guy. Sure, if every day includes shedding 100 pounds, running 7 marathons in a week, and biking across Canada for a casual 13,000-kilometer ride. In today's episode, we get up close with Matt once again. He breaks down the very framework that catapulted him from life's sidelines filled with depression and anxiety to the front lines of transformation and living with purpose.
It could, at the end of the day, put you in the position that you read about so often when you're on your deathbed and you say, I wish I would have. And that's a terrible, terrible deal to have dealt to you. So take the journey.
We've now had the pleasure of just going through quite the journey with you and getting to experience the ride for change, all the ups, all the downs. And you and I talked before about taking some time to really focus in on the transformation framework, the transformation process, how you went from being overweight, depressed, to a man who could go out and run 7 marathons in 7 days or ride 13,000 kilometers over 100 days and actually develop some purpose in life again. So to start this conversation off, why don't you just kind of give us your definition of human transformation?
Yeah, it's a really difficult question to answer sometimes because human transformation is very complex. Most people think of transformation from a physical perspective. They think of losing weight, of gaining muscle, of becoming fitter, and that is a part of the transformational journey because fitness is so important, as we know. Mm-hmm. But transformation is way broader. It is a complete holistic process. It doesn't just focus on one part of the human being. It focuses on everything, the fitness, the mental side. And I explain it as being equivalent to a baby learning to walk. If you've ever watched a baby starting to progress towards walking, they go from crawling to grabbing onto furniture. And then one day the baby lets go of the furniture and takes those first few steps. In that moment, their world is completely and permanently changed for the better. And here's what's interesting about that whole process. The baby will fall down, and it may even fall down and hurt his or herself, but the baby will get back up and try again. It doesn't know the outcome. It just knows it's something that will get them to a better place. So they continue to try until they finally get it. And what's interesting is once they get it, they never go back. You never see a baby learning to walk and then going back to crawling. And I remind people that this is what transformation is. It's a brand new tomorrow and not a slightly better yesterday. So for me, getting in shape was a slightly better yesterday. From a mental perspective, I still wasn't finding happiness. I hadn't achieved that brand new tomorrow. So when we talk about human transformation, it's not just physical, it is everything, and it delivers a brand new tomorrow, not a slightly better yesterday. It is experiencing new capabilities or dropping destructive behavior that makes you a happier person. And that's the best way I can describe it. But it's like world peace. It sounds brilliant, but it's very difficult to achieve. You know what I'm talking about, right? Like people say too often, hey, it's human transformation. It's like saying, hey, let's just implement world peace. It is a really neat thing to do, but it's very hard and very complex. So we'll talk a little bit more about how we do it, but to me, that's what human transformation means.
Yeah. You brought up another question that you mentioned that once a baby learns how to walk, they don't go back to crawling. And you've seen some people go out and they've done maybe a physical transformation where they lose a bunch of weight, or maybe they'll kick an addiction like alcohol or drugs or something like that. But then a year or two down the road, they tend to go back to their old ways, their old habits. Is that a baby going back to crawling, or is there something else that they missed there?
So this is a really good question, because in my own story, I was a 300-pound drinker, smoker, who was 5 years away from having a heart attack. And I managed to get fit, but I was still drinking. So why would a human being go through the effort to get fit, but yet still continue down a path that's destructive? And what I see when people fail and fall backwards is because they're not actually doing a transformation in the right way. You're not dealing with the mental aspects. You're not dealing with what is limiting your happiness in your life. You're not looking for the root cause of the things that are making you less happy than you potentially could be. You may get fit. You may get a new job. You may start a new relationship. You may kick an addiction. But if you're doing it and you're not doing it wholly and completely for the right reasons, and we'll talk about what those right reasons are in a second, you will fall back. You'll have that slightly better yesterday feeling. And the problem with a slightly better yesterday, it's not sustainable if the root cause still exists.
Well, then that's a perfect segue into why don't you break down your transformation framework and walk us through some of the principles you use to become who you are today?
Yeah, so the first stage is the most nebulous. It's the one that people always kind of have the most questions about, and it's the one where I say you need to sort of take this journey. It's what I call discovery. And the best way that I can describe it is taking a journey and removing yourself out of the chaos of your day-to-day life. Because every day we wake up, we're bombarded by external stimuli: work, job, family, kids, illness, paying bills. It's very difficult to find the signal in that chaos. So I ask people, if they're considering undertaking their own transformational journey, start with doing this discovery. Try to find silence. And I mean it. It's literally silence. It's finding your space so that you can listen to your internal thoughts and truly dig down and identify those things that are making you unhappy. And it's a very difficult process to go through because the answers are sometimes rough. It could be a bad marriage. It could be you don't like your job. It could be that you have relationships in your life that you want to sever. It's often not just getting in shape. It's often not just quitting smoking. It's something more dramatic and deeper. So you need to go away and you need to listen to those thoughts and find that stillness. And, truly ask yourself, what is it that's wrong with my life? And once you find the answers, you can start to work towards a solution.
If you don't mind, what were some of those things that you figured out in your discovery process?
Yeah, when I went through mine, my background story was I got fit, and then I started to feel a level of grayness come over me. And I'll describe it as depression. Sometimes it felt like a gray blanket was around me. And for me, I had gotten to a point in life where all those things that were driving me, motivating me, stopped making sense. I didn't want to buy a new car. I didn't want to buy another house. I didn't want to take another vacation. I was finding these things that were my motivators in the past were no longer motivating me. I was starting to go through the aging process, midlife crisis, where what made sense to me when I was 20 and 30 no longer made sense to me when I was 40 and 50. And I knew now I had to identify the new items, the new parameters that would help motivate me and pursue a happier life going forward, because I could no longer assume that getting the next raise or getting a new title or finding that really next great job would satisfy my needs as a human being. And I knew I needed to find a new purpose. So that for me And that's where I had the career crash. I literally committed career suicide because I wasn't addressing it, but my behavior was destroying it.
Yeah.
And when I finally knew, I walked away from my career. And that was the beginning of my discovery when I said, that's not serving the purpose anymore. I need to go out and find my new purpose. And it is an existential trip because you really need to get into your thoughts and answer the question, what do you want to be when you grow up, version 2.0? So it's a difficult process, but it has to be done with truthful, honest approach, because if you lie to yourself, it'll be those step backwards that we talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm. So you go into discovery, you start to identify a clear purpose, and then how can others use that purpose once they've identified it for themselves to drive their transformation?
So for me, staging is about identifying those things that are limiting your happiness. It could be destructive behavior. You need to get rid of it. It could be getting in shape. It could be dealing with a bad relationship. There's a lot of different things that could be limiting your happiness. Once you start the process of transforming, purpose is the fuel. So for me, going to the gym every day is very difficult. But going to the gym every day, knowing that I'll be riding a 13,000 kilometer ride for sick children, motivated me.
Yeah.
Purpose isn't often the ultimate thing that's going to make you happy, but it is something you need to push you through the difficulty of the transformational process. So when you get up and go to the gym every day, you show up, you do a really great job, you're losing weight, you're getting fit. But if you don't have something that you see in that distance, you may find yourself dropping backwards. You start to feel fatigue. So it's important to have that purpose, and purpose can change. You know, for your transformational journey, you may decide you can no longer go to work and do the job that you were trained to do. It's killing your mind. So you decide that one of the limiting factors in your life is, I want a new job. So to get that new job, you need to get more education. So you start to go to school. Now you can see the purpose of finding that dream job is what's driving your behavior to go to school and get yourself educated. If you just went to school for the sake of going to school, you know, you may just love learning, and a lot of people do, but for some people, they need to know that there's a result, and that's your purpose.
And you use the term staging. Can you explain what you mean by that a little bit more?
Yeah, so all too often once people go through the discovery process, they kind of get a sense of what they want to do, where they want to go, what they want to be when they grow up. They're starting to understand what their end state kind of looks like. There's nothing worse than going out the very next day and hitting a roadblock. And the example I give people is, imagine saying, I'm going to get in shape. On New Year's Day, I'm going to get up and I'm going to run or walk or climb or skip. I'm going to do something. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to get in shape. And they wake up day one and they don't have running shoes. Guess what? They're immediately hitting a roadblock or an impediment. And all too often, those small pebbles in the road is all that it takes to stop someone and push them backwards. So what I tell people is, when you're staging, identify barriers or impediments that will immediately stop or hinder your journey, because they're usually easily dealt with, and if you can't remove them, at least mitigate. Make them less impactful. Recognize them, work around them, but don't get after something. Like, don't go to the airport to take the trip if you don't have your passport. It's just not going to work. And there's nothing more defeating than, wow, you know, day one, I failed. That is a punch in the gut. And if you can identify those things in the staging process, your plan is going to be a lot smoother and cleaner, and you should be able to make a lot more progress.
What I'm hearing, and I just want to make sure I'm understanding this, is when you have that inspiration, that time of motivation, and you're like, I'm going to get in shape, or I'm going to run a marathon, or I'm going to quit drinking, or whatever the the purpose, the mission becomes. When you have that inspiration, if it's like, well, I'm going to run a marathon, well, then right then go get some running shoes. Go take care of all the things that are going to keep you from doing that. If you're going to quit drinking alcohol and you're all gung-ho about it, dump out all the booze in your house and stop buying it. Like, so that when the time comes around that you're like, oh, I have to go for the run now, I have an excuse because I don't have shoes or I don't have the clothes or blah, blah, blah.
Exactly. And you not only identified in the staging process, you not only have to identify those roadblocks or those impediments, but sometimes those impediments are the traps. So if you decide you want to get in shape, yes, if you don't have running shoes, there's a tactical step. You need to go out and get the running shoes. If you want to get fit, you may need to go out and get a fitness plan from a fitness instructor. Those are obvious ones. In that staging process, you identify those things. But you touched on something very important. If you know that your current, say, physical state, say you're obese, if you know that that state is making you a depressed person because you really want to get out and take your dogs for a walk, and you decide you're going to get in shape and eat healthy, it's not always just procuring something to start the journey. It often is changing your environment. So you just said it. If you're a smoker that wants to quit, get rid of your cigarettes. If you're an alcoholic that drinks too much, get rid of your alcohol. It's really putting yourself in a position to be successful. Don't let a difficult process be full of landmines that you could potentially step on. Clear the field, because it's going to be hard enough as is. The last thing you need in your journey is to step on that landmine day 1, day 2, because it's gutting. It's like getting up and standing on a scale after being on a diet for 3 weeks and putting 2 pounds on. It's so hard to continue the process, and that's why a lot of people fail.
So we have the discovery, and then you move into staging. At some point, you have to start like executing. So is that the next step in the process?
Yeah, the next 2 steps are tied to that. So discovery kind of gives you your compass. That's the direction you want to go in. That's your North Star. Staging, you're preparing for the journey. You're getting everything in place. You're buying your supplies. You're getting packed for the trip. The next phase is strategic. Now you want to identify high-level strategies you will employ to complete your transformation. So an example there would be, I'm dissatisfied with my job. So a high-level strategy would be, I'm going to get more education. That is a very high-level strategy. It identifies a bucket of potential. It's a potential mechanism you'll use to achieve the desired end state that you've identified. Perhaps you've identified bad relationships in your life that you need to deal with. There's a strategy that you'll want to use to execute on improving or removing those relationships from your life. So this is the time, if you are a company, this is your strategic plan. This is your higher level strategies that you're going to use to execute your transformational journey. And they're important because imagine if you were going on a holiday and you started with booking the seat on the plane. That's a very tactical step. You don't even know where you're going yet. You don't know how you're going to get there. So you have to start at those higher level strategies because they're really those broad mechanisms you're going to use to execute your transformational journey. After that, you're now going to convert those strategies with the end state in mind, and you're going to start to create a very tactical plan. And this is where you start to talk about actions, names, dates, resources. This is where you actually start to put things down on paper and say on Monday, on Tuesday, on Wednesday. And these tactics are so important because all too often, when we go onto social media, there's always this philosophy of inspiration and motivation. Just do it. Change your life. Become a happier individual. Nothing is possible in this world unless you build an executable plan around it. Whether or not you're driving from your house to your job, or you're taking a journey around the world, you have an idea of the actions you're going to need to execute. And there's a very important reason why those tactics are so important, because they're going to allow you to assess progress. You can put a checkbox. I want to run a marathon, so my strategy is going to be, I'm going to get in shape. My tactic is to join a running room. Check. I'm going to go running Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Check. I'm going to measure my 10K time. Check. I'm going to look for, it's tactical. It's allowing you to see the work is making a difference. I'm starting to get better. And trust me, progress builds momentum. There's nothing better than progress, because you feel empowered at that point. So strategy, then the tactics, the actual day-to-day actions you're going to execute. And that's how we actually move the ball down the field in your transformational journey.
How did progress motivate you on the ride for change? Because I remember talking to you, it was 3 or 4 days into it, really rough start to the ride for change. Was that just grit that kept you going through there, or was it you're like, you know what, I'm 4 days in, 96 to go, I've already completed this many kilometers?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because sometimes it's really difficult to see. Like, there's an action plan. We clearly had the action plan. We had a schedule. We had the routes. We had the start and the end dates. I had my training plan. We had all the resources identified. We really had a well put together plan. And once we started executing it, you're right. You start to look for progress. And each day I would ride, I would put a check mark by it and say, I've done something. And I would see the donation start to rise. But this is where we're going to start to get into, and we'll talk about it a little bit later. Some days, the purpose and the progress and everything else around you doesn't matter. And what I want to say to people is that some days are just going to suck. And there's no candy coating it. It's the day that you get up to run, you're stiff and you're sore, your child is sick, you have the sniffles coming on, it's raining outside, you have a decision. Should I go or shouldn't I go? And that's where that purpose and that's where your mindset need to be ready for days like that, because there's nothing I can tell anybody to say, hey, we can outwit that. We can't. It's life, and life is. So for me, that journey that I took, the 13,000 kilometer ride, was like life compressed into 100 days. Every day I got up, I was like, I don't want to go. But I had a high enough purpose. I had a good community around me. I had a measurable tactical plan. And I had the mindset that said, just get on that bike, Matt, and start pedaling. And remember, I said, progress builds momentum. I can tell you that my mindset changed after the first 5K on that bike. After the next 10K, I got better. I started to feel better mentally about myself. So this is what I mean. When you get out of bed, some days are absolutely going to suck. But trust me, just put your foot into the running shoe or onto the bike and start. And you'll more often than not be successful.
What's the next step in the framework, or did we skip over any? I know I asked
No, you actually, I think you asked just the right question, because so now you have if we recap, we've done our discovery, so we understand what's wrong in our world, what we want to fix, those limiting factors, those things that we need to change. We've identified our desired end state. We've developed strategies to help us get there. We've staged it so we don't have, we've removed all the barriers and obstacles that we can identify. We've created a tactical plan. Now we're going to execute. And execution is just that. It is getting up, looking at your plan, looking at your fitness program, looking at your life plan that you've nailed down. It's very tactical, and you start executing. And like any plan that you execute, you have to have those measurable outcomes. You have to say, I've done it, I can measure it, I can check it off, I've moved the ball down the field. If you don't have those measurable outcomes, you'll never know whether or not you're doing it right, you're making progress, so you want to make sure you have measurable outcomes. The other thing about execution that's super important is consequences. When you do something really good in your life and you make progress and you execute a big part of that plan, pat yourself on the back, buy yourself that new running watch or the new bike that you've always wanted or the new computer to do better podcasts. But when you let yourself down, have consequences. Imagine a world where we didn't have bad consequences. If you don't hold yourself accountable and sort of, I don't want to use the word punish, but hold yourself accountable to a certain standard, because if you don't, you'll never change the behavior. You'll never feel what it means to do that correction. And it's like somebody committing a crime and not going to jail for it. They're never going to realize that if you don't change your behavior, you're going to have these bad consequences. And I think we often celebrate, hey, I had a great week. I'm going to go out and eat a lot of food. Well, maybe you deserved it, and that's your reward. That's your positive consequences. But if you ate every day, what are you going to do? Are you not going to eat for the next week? So you have to have good and bad consequences. Hold yourself accountable, but celebrate the victories. And also remember that in the execution phase, and I forgot to mention it in the tactical planning side, you're working with your support community. You do not want to execute this plan in isolation. So make sure that in the tactical planning phase and in the execution phase, you're always looking to build that support community, because it would be like me riding across Canada with no team. I couldn't do it. It'd be physically impossible. So that's execution. The last phase is adoption. Now all those behaviors that you've picked up, the great capabilities, the baby learning to walk, all those destructive behaviors that you've abandoned, you're now defining a new you, a new existence. You're in a new reality. You're in that brand new tomorrow, not the slightly better yesterday. But here you have to always continually assess. Am I still progressing? Is my end state still, is it still accurate? Do I have to do that discovery phase, a mini discovery phase, to make sure I'm always on that right path? We are going to change as we age. This journey is not 1 day, 1 week, 1 month. It is a lifelong pursuit. You're always doing these discovery moments where you're asking yourself, am I happy? Why am I snapping at my wife? Why am I smoking? Why am I drinking? You're always going back to that question. What is limiting my behavior? And as you adopt and execute throughout, you'll always want to make these tweaks. You'll always want to adjust the plan accordingly to make sure you're following that true end state that you're after.
It's interesting because I'm sitting here thinking, what would be some of the objections to this framework of what you've just laid out? What would be, if I were somebody listening to this podcast or this interview right now, the only thing I can think of is, well, starting and developing this transformation plan and working through these frameworks is a lot of work. And it's like, yeah, transformation in general is a lot of work. If this is where you are and this is where you want to be, there's going to be work involved. So why not put a little bit of work into making sure that the work you do is as focused on where you're trying to get to as possible?
Yeah, so I love this conversation because it is a lot of work, but so is being depressed. So is being unhappy. So is the divorce rate. So is the suicide rate. So is the drug addiction rate. There's so many things that are wrong with our society that are pinned back towards the fact that a lot of people are living in silent pain and suffering. So that itself is more work and is more damaging than undertaking this journey. The other argument I hear is, it sounds great, but it's because you have money, or you're at a point in your life where you can do this. I'm a single mom. I'm a single father. I don't have a job. I don't have money. I'm not saying go out and quit your job if it makes you unhappy. I'm not saying join a very expensive gym to make yourself fitter. You need to work within the boundaries that you've been given, but those boundaries are exactly the thing that you're trying to change. So if you're in a position where you can't afford to go back and get educated, then the tactical plan must include a way of positioning yourself so that you can get that education. And if your purpose is good enough and great enough, you will find it within you to make that happen. If you are unhappy in your marriage, you have two choices. You can stay in your marriage. You have three choices. You can stay in your marriage as is, you can improve your marriage, or you can get out. If you decide that you cannot be happy in your marriage and you need to get out, then you need to execute tactical steps so that you can do that and be safe and be secure. It may not happen overnight, and you may not have the money and the security to do that today, but the tactical plan and that staging process must allow you to develop a plan that is highly probable so that you can get after it. So it's like saying, I'm really, really unhappy, but it costs too much effort and too much money or to improve my situation. Well, then the alternative is to be unhappy, and that's no way to live your life. So those are the things that I typically hear. It's really easy for a middle-aged man who has some money in the bank and who's already worked a big chunk of his life. But guess what? I mean, even if I have a bank account full of money and I have freedom and I have resources, so do a lot of people that end up committing suicide. So I can't stress enough that, don't look at those limiting factors in your life. You have to take the journey. You have to fight the fight. You have to identify those barriers, and you have to think about a way of removing them. And that's why I say go through this process, because if you just accept your status quo because it's too difficult, you're never going to find your happiness.
You've talked a lot about happiness right there. How over the years has this transformation process improved your happiness? You had mentioned before that you were depressed, you were drinking. Where are you at now with regards to your happiness level?
It's a battle every day, but this process and this framework has done a couple of things for me. It's made me aware. As you know, before I sort of started this journey, which started with the 7 and 7, the 300-kilometer run, I was committing career suicide. I was a drinker, a smoker, significantly overweight. I was living a life that was sending me to an early grave. And it wasn't just the physicality of it, it was a mental aspect of it as well. So this process has gotten me to a point where I don't have those same issues anymore. I'm much fitter. I have happier days more often than not. But to say I'm 100% happy every day, I won't lie to people. It's not true. Mm-hmm. This process I'm talking about is a tool, just like fitness is a tool. It's a tool that will allow you to improve your life and improve your happiness, but it's not a magic pill. There is life. You can't outsmart life. There's no way. You can't outsmart the aging process. There's no way. But you can come up with strategies, and you can leverage tools that will allow you to put yourself in a better place as you go through that. The challenges that life brings every day. I mean, and it truly is. It's a battle. A lot of people out there are suffering with depression. Right now, the pharmaceutical side of that is huge. It's absolutely huge. People are going to their doctors. They're getting prescribed drugs. They drink sometimes. They smoke. They take other illegal drugs. There's a reason for this because life is hard.
Yeah.
People are dealing with trauma. People are dealing with the day-to-day grind of life. I just want people to know that there are tools that can minimize, not remove, but minimize and mitigate the difficulties that life presents, and try to squeeze as much happiness out of life as you can, because you live once. I think about it right now. I've got maybe 25 Christmases left, and I'll be gone. I don't want to live another day thinking I'm stuck. I have a lot of friends, and one of them, I won't mention his name, says to me, you know what, I'll be able to retire in 5 years. And every time I see him, he says, I'll be able to retire in 5 years. And it's the whole, pension and years served and your age and all that stuff. And I hear him, and he says the same thing every time, and it's like he's waiting. He's waiting for this event to occur 5 years from now when he believes his happiness is going to land. So 5 years wasted, 5 years closer to the grave, and I'm not sure he's going to be any more happier than he is today. So I say, take control of your life. Jump on a process like this, leverage these tools, and take control of your life now. At the end of the documentary trailer I released today, I said, transformation is a journey, and I've taken that journey. Am I 100% better? Am I cured? Am I happy every day? No, but man, I'm in a lot better off place than I was 10, 15 years ago. I feel better. I'm capable of doing things I never thought I could do. So leverage these tools, leverage this process. It's going to improve your happiness. It's going to give you a better probability of happiness, but it's not going to be a silver bullet, and it's very hard work.
Once, and to what you just said here, once someone has achieved some level of transformation, what's next? How do you sustain and build upon that? And what are you doing to sustain and build upon that as well?
A really good question, because we're going through it right now. I've run the 300 kilometers. I helped a charity. We did the 13,000 kilometer ride. We helped another amazing charity. We've got this amazing community around me, and I've learned a lot about myself through the ride. And here's a great example of how this process helps you constantly course correct. If I was to do another event next year, let's say I was going to go back out onto the road, I can tell you right now I'd be doing it for a lot of different reasons. I would be doing it with less ego. I would be doing it with more compassion to help other people and make it more inclusive. So how does that answer my question, Matt? Well, what transformation forces you to do is constantly check in with your plan, with your end state. Go through those mini discovery processes. Step away from the noise, listen to your thoughts, and use your learnings to course correct. You may discover that, you know what, I've decided to change jobs. I want to become a dental hygienist. There you go. one close to you. And you go off and you start your education process and you realize you don't like it. Okay, then change. But you've started the process, so good for you. You know, change gets change. And I just think that it's not a one and done. It's a lifelong journey. But if you never take the journey, you'll never see the view. So be prepared for a lot of course correcting, but you're now aware. You're now aware of your happiness, and you can feel it. You're not wearing a suit, you know, whether it be fitness or mental, this gray suit that's just holding you back. You're starting to break free of those change. It doesn't mean every day is going to be sunny at all. It's still a challenge. So that's how I would describe the process. You're going to go through moments where you'll learn, take those learnings, remap your plan, assess your end state, make sure it's still the one you want, and get after it.
We're getting ready to wrap up the end of 2023. The last couple years have been wild for the world.
Yeah.
If you could distill everything you've learned into one just amazing piece of advice for the listeners going into this new year, or maybe somebody who's just listening to this episode for the first time, what would it be from this transformation process?
Take the journey. Take the journey. It's hard to describe, and I know that I'm not. I don't have it as bad as a lot of people in this world, and some people are in situations where the journey doesn't even seem feasible. Like there's wars going on, and I don't want to dismiss any of that. But for the individuals that I know in my world, and for a lot of people around the world, outside of these extraordinary circumstances that we seem to get hit with day to day now, whether it be COVID or some other major event that could hold you back, if you're not in that type of position, and you have the ability, take the journey. And I tell people, I just finished up a presentation I made. I said, it's like you're standing at the foot of the mountain and you're looking up and it seems so long. And you're kind of like, wow, I don't know if I want to take this journey. It seems like it's going to be really hard. And people are coming down the mountain going, the view is incredible, man. It's like, it changed my perception. Take the journey. Be weary, that it's going to be hard. Every day is going to be a challenge. But if you never take that journey, you'll never see the view. And more importantly, if things like rain are something you don't like, and it's raining on that day, there's never going to be a time in your life where you don't have these minor hindrances. There's always going to be something you have to deal with. There's no perfect time for this.
Yeah. But
time is the one resource you'll never get back. And I always use the expression, is the juice worth the squeeze? And, it is, because happiness and the number of days you have on this world are so important. You have to maximize the happiness over as many days as you can, or it's a life wasted. And I just want to tell people, take the journey. It's amazing, and it will give you a chance to fight back. Like a lot of people are silently suffering right now, and I want them to know that they can fight back. I'm not a medical expert. Drugs, the pharmaceuticals, the experts, they're still required. They should be consulted. But why not take as much power back as you can as an individual? You can make changes in your world and you can become a happier person. Then I think it's worth it.
Yeah, there's no do-overs in this life.
No. And as you get older, like I can't imagine, I use the example of my friend, in 5 years I can retire. 5 years.
Yeah.
You're living in a state of unhappiness because so people might say, well, Matt, that's his living. That's how he's getting his paycheck. That's his retirement. I understand that. But at what value do you put on your happiness? What value do you put on the number of days you have on this world? It's like at some point it's not worth it. It's just not worth it holding on to something that's limiting your happiness. You need to identify those things that are limiting your happiness and make those changes.
It's interesting that it's 5 years. December 2018, which is 5 years ago, was when I left my job of 10 years to go pursue my own thing, to go do my own thing. And to think that had I not done that and spent 5 more years there, none of this would be here. The Life Edge, I wouldn't know you. We wouldn't have had these conversations. Nothing. That's how long 5 years is. And to think that I would have, if I was living that mentality of, I'll just give it 5 more years, I would have given up everything. The happiness in my marriage, where we live, everything we have wouldn't exist. I wouldn't even be married because she was like, I'm going to leave you if you don't get out of here.
And let me ask you a question. I'm going to flip the table here because I love transformational stories. Yours is a version of a transformational story. When you were sitting there on that day you decided to leave, how many obstacles, how many things did you see in front of you that said, don't do it?
Everything. There was not a single green flag that said, go this way. Everything was like, stop. The people around me were like, stop. You're giving up a good job. You've got money. You've got this. You've worked so long to be there. What are you going to go do? What do you like? Yeah, there was not a single sign that, other than my own happiness and my own future of where I wanted to be, that said, go for it.
And to me, Chris, like that. If I was selling a transformation in a bottle, I would get your testimonial on the back, because that's exactly what transformation does. It's the key and the map to a destination, many destinations in your life that will always allow you to achieve the maximum level of satisfaction and happiness. And if you don't pursue that, it's very sad. And here's the reality of it. It not only makes you sad, it not only limits your happiness, it also, you're also wasting those days. But the reality of the situation is it impacts your physical health. It impacts your mental health. It reduces your lifespan. It makes you a person that a lot of people don't want to be around. It limits your relationships. The impacts of not taking the journey or having that courage to take the first step, like the baby letting go of the table, is monumental. And it's pebble in a pond. The ripple effect of that decision not to pursue that will last and linger for many, many years. And it could at the end of the day put you in the position that you read about so often when you're on your deathbed and you say, I wish I would have. And that's a terrible, terrible deal to have dealt to you. So take the journey.
Yeah. Honestly, the one thing driving me the most in those early years was I was not going to get to the end of my life and think, I wish I would have.
Yeah. It's, and there's going to be a lot of false starts where you think you figured it out. There's going to be points where you have to take a 90-degree angle, and some decisions are just going to be, I need to quit my job, I need to leave this relationship. They're going to be like black and white, but at the end of the day, it's like trying to play chess with no strategy.
Yeah.
Transformation is the strategy, and you're playing the game of life, and it's a very complex game. It's like chess. So I just want people to understand that there are strategies, there are tools that they can leverage, and it's not just about getting fit. It is everything in your life that drives happiness. So if you're going to make a resolution in New Year's, and I'm not a resolution guy, but let's talk about that for a second. If your resolution is to get fit, just pause for a second and ask yourself, why do I want to get fit? Ask yourself, what do I look like? What have I achieved at the end? What am I capable of doing? I want to run, I want to race, something like that. Ask yourself, what's limiting you from getting fit? Start to incorporate them, the tools and the processes in small steps, even if it's a resolution, and you'll start to see benefits immediately.
Matt, I'm going to have to make you an honorary guest host of the podcast. I love having you on.
Well, you're a success story, and one of these times I'm going to have to interview you.
I'm up for that, but I can't say thank you enough for coming on and sharing the framework that you have learned, not just on the Ride for Change, but over the last couple years, and sharing that with our listeners, and hopefully even if it just helps someone transform their life, one person, like that's just amazing, because living in a world where you're unhappy, it's just not worth it.
No, and everybody around you suffers. And listen, to anybody that sees this, I think we've said before, I'm on @Divine Transformation on Instagram. We're going to be doing some big things in 2024. I'm going to be going back out there and doing something hopefully as big, if not bigger, than what we did last year to help another charity. But one of the things I want to do for sure this time is I want to put the community in front of the events. I don't want the event to be about Matt Devine running, racing, riding across Canada, across North America. I want the message of how we can help individuals leading the story. I really want people out there who want to make 2024 the best year ever to tune in and follow this journey, because we're going to share all this stuff with people. I'm obviously going to be talking with you more, but I want to give the people out there a story to follow that I hope will give them better insight into the tools and the process. And instead of just making a New Year's resolution, they're going to start a transformational journey. And believe me, the two are very, very different.
Well, Matt, I can't thank you enough for joining us again on another podcast. I'm looking forward to 2024, what we're going to do. To the listener, the viewer, if you like this podcast, please like, subscribe, share it, help us spread the word. Take this transformation framework and put it to use, because you're the only one who can really make your life better. And this framework works, and Matt's living proof of that. So, Matt, thank you again for joining us on another podcast.
Thank you, my friend. Appreciate you.